The President Diaries. Jimmy Carter, the 39th President. Jimmy Carter was born October 1st, 1924 in Plains, Georgia. He graduated from Public School of Plains, attended Georgia Southwestern College and the Georgia Institute of Technology, and received a bachelor's degree from the United States Naval Academy in 1946. Carter thought of himself as a Washington outsider who was not tainted by the politics and the corruption of Washington. He had a great capacity to relate to, appreciate, and understand different people and points of view, and he tends to be quite liberal in his attitudes. In this manner, he thinks more than he speaks and sees others as an equal or a person first, and not just a man or a woman. Jimmy Carter is a man who thrives on friendship and teamwork and tends to not be completely immersed in the world around him. In 1946, instead of running for the House of Representatives, Carter ran for governor, but he came in a measly third place. In 1970, Carter ran again and appealed to the voters who had previously not voted for him, and he won the governor. However, he left some of his key ideals, such as his respect for black leaders, to do so. After the disappointing loss against Nixon and after Watergate, Carter felt that the Democrats needed a centrist and a political outsider, and he thought he was both. Carter used his anonymity to his advantage and campaigned with issues that resonated with the public. He used his integrity to hit home with people who were outraged with the Watergate scandal. After securing the Democratic nomination, Carter was able to win over Gerald Ford, who at that time was not that exciting. Regarding Carter's philosophy in the United States, Carter wanted to set an honest example for the American people, especially after the events of Watergate had left the American public untrusting and suspicious. Throughout his campaign, Carter wanted to come across to the people as one of them. The Southern peanut farmer did not want to be above any of the public. He chose to walk to the White House on Inauguration Day instead of the traditional limo ride, and when addressing the public, he kept an atmosphere of informality by wearing a cardigan sweater. Carter believed that political leadership should function for the common good, emphasizing efficiency in government, the removal of racial barriers, and ecology. During the 1970s, much of the economy was based on the import and domestic production of oil. While 8 million jobs were created during Carter's term, inflation, interest rates, and unemployment rose at a higher rate. Inflation rose from 4.8% in 1976 to 12% in 1980, largely because of the country's dependence on foreign oil, which increased by 65% annually since 1973. The U.S. consumed a fourth of the OPEC productions. Hence, oil prices increased from $13 to $34 a barrel. In response, Carter proposed a limit on imported oil, a gradual price decrease on American oil, and a development of alternative energy solutions such as solar, nuclear, and geothermal power, oil and gas from shale and coal, and synthetic fuels. Carter also established a national energy policy to deal with energy shortage and increase production of petroleum. Among other bills passed in legislation, including an Emergency Natural Gas Act, which authorized government to allocate natural gas, the Energy Security Act, which later created the U.S. Synthetic Fuels Corporation, and the first Energy Package Law. Carter also funded for an oil pipeline to be constructed in Alaska, and a regulated strip mining, the Surface Mining Control and Reclamation Act. Overall, however, Carter did not have good relations with Congress. Congress first shot down the Consumer Protection Bill and the Labor Reform Package, so Carter retaliated by vetoing the Public Works Package in 1978. Carter even called Congress's tax committee a pack of ravenous wolves when they changed his tax plan. Even with the tension between Carter and Congress, Carter was still able to lower transportation costs and establish a super fund in Congress to clean up toxic waste sites. Foreign policy was a foreign concept to Carter, who lacked national and international experience as a one-term governor. Carter mainly wanted to avoid military intervention and improve U.S. relations with the Soviet Union to come to an economic and arms control agreement. To do so, the president appointed Zbigniew Brzezinski as National Security Advisor and Cyrus Vance as Secretary of State. This decision, however, backfired, as Brzezinski's strong anti-communist views clashed with Vance's cautious and patient views when discussing tactics, strategies, and goals of foreign policy. Carter took up Brzezinski's ideals, which led to several confrontations with the Soviet Union. after Carter ordered a 5-year defense buildup. The Soviet Union invaded Afghanistan. Carter attempted to implement the SALT II treaty. However, this brought up trouble in Carter's negotiating table. The president finally cut off grain sales and boycotted the Moscow Summer Olympic Games. Carter also signed the agreement in principle with Panama to end a U.S. occupation of Panama Canal. However, he did not include any U.S. senators in this decision until much later. Conservatives opposed to the treaty argued the U.S. had a right to defend the canal. Carter was seen as weak for giving away the Panama Canal. Possibly the most important event involving foreign affairs during Carter's presidency was the Camp David Accords. Carter hoped to recreate peace between Israel and Egypt and Syria after the Yom Kippur War of 1973. Israel moved back into the Sinai Peninsula but still occupied Egyptian territory. He invited the Israel Prime Minister Menachem Begin and Egypt's President Anwar Sadat to Camp David from September 5th to 17th, 1978. Together they were able to reach agreement that Israel would withdraw from Sinai Peninsula as long as the U.S. monitored both countries to make sure neither side attacked the other. One goal of Carter's was to internationally advocate for human rights. He promoted human freedom and protected the individual from arbitrary power of the state. Carter fulfilled his promise early on, suspending military and economic aid in Chile, El Salvador, Nicaragua, and Uganda to protest practices of the government. The Iranian hostage crisis, however, opposed Carter's traditional views of human rights. In 1951, the new Prime Minister Mohammad Mossadegh kicked out the British. The CIA held a coup and restored power to the Pahlavi ruling dynasty, but the Pahlavi dynasty was only allowed to govern once 80% of the oil was transferred to the US and UK. The government turned into a Western puppet in the eyes of the Iranians. Carter kept the Shah in power despite the Shah adopting a more tyrannical viewpoint towards the Iranian people. Carter was not necessarily listening to what the people wanted. So much of Iran complained that their human rights were being violated because they could not choose Ayatollah Khomeini, the leader of the radical Islamic group, as their leader. Iran demanded an apology once Carter brought him into the U.S. for medical treatment, seized 66 Americans, and held them hostage. Carter seemed ineffective at releasing the hostages at first, especially after the media worked up America's apprehension. After quite a while, Carter held a rescue mission, which failed. Carter lost almost all support once the public realized nothing could get done. He finally was able to unblock all Iranian funds and Iran would release the hostages, but was only agreed during Reagan's term. Carter took office just 30 months after the president had left the entire federal government in a shambles. He faced epic challenges: the energy crisis, Soviet aggression, Iran, and above all, a deep mistrust of leadership by his citizens, due to the void the Watergate scandal left behind in the hearts of the American people. Although he was shamed for his inability to restore the prestige of the executive office, Carter was able to leave a very positive legacy behind on history. Carter revived the long-dormant practice of presidential mediation in disputes between other nations, something every succeeding chief executive has emulated to varying degrees. His instance on American leadership in the protection of human rights around the world helped to subvert the power of communist and other dictatorial regimes, and eventually led to the human rights initiatives of the 1980s and 1990s. His efforts produced the first Middle East peace treaty between Israel and Egypt. It remains a cornerstone of the United States security policy in the region. Carter was able to break a quarter-century impasse and began to phase out federal price controls for natural gas and then crude oil. This led to the creation of the Department of Energy and began tax incentives for home insulation and for solar energy. This left a very positive impact on the environment as people slowly weaned off of foreign oil and corrected the economy. He created the modern vice presidency, making Walter F. Mondale a full partner and giving him an office close to his own, access to classified documents, and an involvement in every major decision. Although Jimmy Carter's presidency may go down in history as one that was reflected upon at the time as negative, as we see now, Jimmy Carter did a lot in his time. He was one of the good presidents out there.